All right, welcome to another deep dive. We're all about taking those sources you send our way and, really digging into the good stuff.
The really crucial insights.
Absolutely the stuff that matters.
Yeah.
And today we're tackling something that I know a lot of you in the care sector are going to find super relevant. You sent us a YouTube tutorial, right? From die Flugexpertin Schwester Eva, along with the text, Die Strukturierte Informationssammlung in der Pflege. So we're basically diving headfirst into this whole structured approach to gathering information, in stationary and ambulatory care settings.
Yeah, think nursing homes, hospitals, even home care,
Exactly. And our mission, should we choose to accept it,
is to really get to grips with this Strukturierte Informationssammlung,
Yeah.
or SIS for short.
right, the SIS, and to figure out why it's becoming so important in the way we think about modern care.
You hit the nail on the head. And what's really interesting here is that it's not just about adding more paperwork to an already overloaded system. Our sources are actually pointing to a shift. It seems like there's a real push to move away from this, overwhelming administrative burden.
That takes time away from patients.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
So the SIS is really trying to create a system that's more centered around the patient.
More efficient.
Yeah, more efficient and, in the end, leading to better care.
Okay, I'm hooked. Let's unpack this SIS thing. What makes it so different?
Well, it all starts with the fact that it's not presented as just another form you have to fill out.
Thank goodness for that.
Right. Both the video and the text are very clear about that. They emphasize that the SIS is like this, a science-based concept for kicking off the four-phase care process.
So it's a whole different way of thinking about things. It's not just ticking boxes.
Exactly. The big goal here seems to be like boosting the skills of caregivers.
Making them even better at what they do.
Yeah, and at the same time, keeping the person who's receiving the care, like, front and center. It's about understanding their story.
Their background.
Right, their whole life story, their biographical context.
Yeah.
And not just that, but also getting a clear picture of what risks they might be facing and what resources are available to support them.
It's like a holistic view of the person.
That's a great way to put it. And if you remember, both the tutorial and the text break down the SIS into these four, interconnected parts.
Right.
They all work together,
So first you've got the structured information collection itself, which is like the main document.
The heart of it all.
Then there's the individual measures plan, which is all about putting that information into action.
Putting together a plan based on what you've learned.
Then we've got the report sheet, which is for keeping track of everything that's happening, making notes.
And tracking any changes.
Exactly. And last but not least, there's the evaluation. Because, of course, you need to see if what you're doing is actually working.
Right. Making sure the care plan is staying relevant and effective as time goes on.
Couldn't agree more. And these four pieces, they're meant to flow together seamlessly.
They're not just random tasks you check off a list.
The text even makes a point of saying that to really make the SIS work, you need a total change in the way you approach documenting care.
It can't just be something you add on top of what you're already doing.
It's a fundamental shift in how you think about it.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's zoom in on that core component, the structured information collection document itself. It seems like it's broken down into specific fields.
It is. It is.
Get it.
And that's what makes it so effective,
It's
right?
organized.
Exactly. And the first one, Field A, is all about identification. So it's where you put down the basics, like the person's name, date of birth, where the care is being provided, and the date the information is recorded. Simple stuff, right?
The essential details.
Right. And of course, it includes a space for the signature of the care professional who is, responsible for this information.
Makes sense. But there's something else in Field A that really caught my eye. It's the signature line for the person receiving care.
Ah, yes. Or their relatives or legal guardians if they can't sign themselves.
Exactly. The text really emphasizes that this isn't just a formality. It's meant to symbolize a mutual understanding. It's like everyone's on the same page about the care plan and the individual's right to make their own decisions.
It's like a little contract. The tutorial actually calls it a small contract. It signifies that they've all talked about the situation and they agree on the assessment of the current situation.
I love that. And Field A also clarifies whether this conversation is like the initial assessment or a follow-up discussion, which makes total sense, right?
It's super important for keeping track of changes over time.
Now, while getting the signature from the person receiving care isn't always mandatory, The text does mention that it depends on the specific facility.
Right. Some facilities might have different policies.
But the recommendation is definitely there to encourage that feeling of partnership.
Making sure everyone feels like they're part of the decision-making process.
Absolutely. Setting that tone of collaboration right from the start.
Exactly. And then we move on to field B, which I think is really, really important. Both the video and the text make it clear that this entire section is all about the perspective of the person receiving the care.
This is where their voice really gets to shine through.
Exactly. It's where they tell their story in their own words. This section captures how they feel about needing support, what they want to keep doing on their own, their hopes and fears about their independence.
It's their lived experience, right, that's taking center stage.
You got it. And the tutorial goes even further. It stresses the importance of using their exact words, actually quoting them.
So their voice is literally on the page.
It's not just about, summarizing what they said. It's about capturing their unique way of expressing themselves.
It really highlights the whole idea of person-centered care.
Exactly. You're not just treating a condition. You're caring for a unique individual with their own story and their own feelings.
And both the video and text use a powerful example here, Frau Weber. She's described as someone who's always been incredibly independent and proud.
Always taking care of herself.
Yeah. So moving into the nursing home was a huge change for her, especially leaving her neighborhood, her community.
It was a big step.
And she had moved in with her daughter after her husband passed away, but she started feeling like she was a burden, even though her daughter was trying to help.
It's tough when you lose that sense of independence.
It is. And that narrative about Frau Weber, the way they tell it in both sources, it really brings home the richness of information that Field B is meant to capture. Her feelings about losing her independence, the emotional impact of moving, her worries about her daughter. These are things a purely medical assessment might miss entirely.
It adds a whole new layer to understanding her needs.
Absolutely. It puts a human face on the whole care situation. All right, so after capturing the individual's perspective in Field B, we move on to Field C1, which is where the care professional comes in, right? This is where their expertise really takes center stage.
Right. Field C1 is where the care professional makes a professional judgment about the person's needs for help, their ability to stay independent, and any health risks they might be facing. And this is all done through a conversation, a dialogue, with the person receiving the care.
So it's a collaborative process.
Very much so. And the text is very clear about the fact that this assessment needs to be rooted in a specific assessment tool, the BI.
The BI.
Yeah. It's a standardized way to make sure everyone's assessing care needs in a consistent way.
Okay, that makes sense. So this professional assessment is organized into 6 different areas, and they're all based on Monica Krowinkle's AEDLs. Those are activities and existential experiences of daily living.
It sounds a bit complicated, but really it's about looking at all the different aspects of a person's life that might need support.
Let's break them down one by one. The first one is cognitive and communicative abilities. What's that all about?
Okay, so this area is all about figuring out how well the person is oriented. Do they know what time it is? Do they know where they are? Who they are? Can they interact with others easily? Can they recognize risks and dangers? Ask for help when they need it.
Important stuff.
It really is. And this section also takes note of any challenging behaviors, things like restlessness at night, maybe refusing care.
We see that sometimes, right?
Yeah, that happens. And for Frau Weber, the example they give is that her speech and swallowing got much better after speech therapy. So that's something positive to know.
Absolutely. It's important to highlight those improvements too. So next up, we have mobility and movement.
This is a big one. It's about how well the person can move around, inside and maybe even outside. Can they get around their home safely? Can they go for walks if they want to? And do they get enough physical activity to stay healthy and stimulated?
Right, because movement is so important for overall well-being.
Exactly. Again, this section also notes any difficult behaviors related to movement, like maybe the person is resistant to using a walker. And they give the example of Frau Weber. Her mobility improved a lot thanks to physiotherapy, and she's able to get around with a walker.
That's great.
It is. But they also notice that she's starting to need more help. So it's not just about whether she can walk, it's about how well she can walk and how much support she needs.
It's a much more nuanced picture.
Exactly. And then we have disease-related requirements and burdens.
This one sounds a bit like it overlaps with their medical history. Is that right?
Well, it's related, but it's not the same thing. The sources make it clear that this isn't just about listing their diagnoses and the medications they're taking. It's about figuring out what kind of professional support they need because of their health conditions.
Okay, so it's about the practical impact of their health on their daily life.
Yes, that's it exactly. So you'd look at like what things make their health situation harder to manage, what kind of therapies they're involved in, whether they're following their treatment plan, all of that.
Makes sense. It's about getting a clear picture of how their health affects their care needs.
Exactly. Then we move on to self-care, which is pretty self-explanatory, I think.
This is about how well they can take care of themselves.
Right. Basic things like washing, dressing, using the toilet, eating, drinking. The idea is to help them keep doing those things on their own for as long as possible.
Maintain their independence.
Absolutely. And you'd know whether they can do these things independently, if they need a little bit of help, or if they need a lot of help.
So it's about finding the right level of support.
Exactly. And then we have living in social relationships. This one highlights how important social connections are for everyone.
It's not just about physical care. It's about their emotional well-being, too.
Right. So this area looks at whether the person can engage in activities, whether it's inside their home or outside, and who helps them with those activities. And they bring up Frau Weber again. Remember, after her husband passed away, she was living with her daughter and her family, but her daughter felt like she might have more opportunities to socialize if she was living in a care home.
It's a good point because social interaction can make a big difference in someone's quality of life.
It really can. And finally, the sixth area is living and domesticity.
So this one is about their immediate living environment.
Right, their personal space within the care facility. It's about figuring out if they can meet their needs and preferences in their living space, whether it's their own room or a shared room, and making sure they feel comfortable and secure. And they give some really specific examples for Frau Weber, like where her favorite chair is, where she likes to nap, things like
I
that.
love that level of detail.
Me too. It shows they're really paying attention to what matters to her. And they also mention that her bed is positioned in a way that she has to get out on her right side, which is her weaker side. She actually prefers getting in and out on her left side.
Oh, that makes a big difference. I can see how that would make her feel insecure.
Exactly. And those details, about her preferring her TV chair and liking to read novels her daughter brings, those all feed into creating a care plan that truly feels personalized.
So Field C1 provides this incredibly thorough picture of the person and their needs, and all of this is done in conversation with them.
Collaboration is key. And all that information then flows into Field C2, which is the risk matrix.
Okay, how does the risk matrix work?
Well, it takes all those insights from those 6 areas we just talked about in Field C1 and turns them into an assessment of potential risks and problems. It's basically like a checklist.
So it lists things like the risk of pressure ulcers, falls, incontinence, pain, nutrition issues.
All the things you want to prevent if possible.
Exactly. And then it has a category for other risks, right?
Yes, because every person is different. And there might be some unique risks that don't fit into those standard categories.
Like maybe they have a history of wandering or they're easily agitated in crowds.
Exactly. So for each of those risks, the care professional marks whether it's present or not, just a simple yes or no. And for Frau Weber, they noted that she is at risk for pressure ulcers.
Okay, makes sense. What happens next?
Well, for each yes answer, they also have to decide if they need to a more detailed assessment, what they call a differential assessment.
So they're figuring out which risks need more attention.
Exactly. They're prioritizing. And that other category is really useful because it lets them document anything that's important but doesn't fit into the standard categories. Like maybe the person has a very specific daily routine that needs to be considered.
It makes the whole assessment much more flexible and personalized.
That's exactly it. So now we have the full picture, right? The individual's perspective, the professional assessment, and the potential risks all documented in the SIS. What comes next?
It's time to put that information into action.
Exactly. And that's where the individual measures plan comes in.
This is where we start talking about specific interventions, right?
You got it. Based on everything we've learned about Frau Weber, this is where we detail exactly what needs to be done to support her, taking into account her preferences, her resources, and of course, those risks we identified in Field C2.
And one thing that both the video and the text emphasize is that this plan needs to be tailored to her daily rhythm.
It's all about her individual needs. For example, they note that she usually gets up around 8 a.m., so the plan needs to reflect that.
It's not about forcing her into a preset schedule.
Exactly. They even go into specifics about her eating habits, like the fact that she has trouble swallowing coffee. They think about her preferred hygiene routine, how she likes to be positioned, what aids she uses, and how her relatives could be involved in her care.
Wow, that's a lot of detail.
It is, and it's all important. The tutorial even provides a sample schedule for Frau Weber's morning routine between 8 and 9 a.m.
Let's hear it.
Okay, so it says that staff should help her get out of bed, walk with her to the bathroom using her walker, let her use the toilet on her own as much as possible, help her get undressed, help her with her morning hygiene at the sink, things like washing her back and legs.
It's so specific.
Right. And they even mention making sure she has all the utensils she needs, laying out her clothes the way she likes them, helping her get dressed and putting on her incontinence pad, and helping her comb her hair.
That's incredible.
It is. It's really about making sure everyone who cares for her knows exactly what needs to be done and how she prefers things.
It takes all the guesswork out of it, and it ensures that Frau Weber feels comfortable and respected.
Exactly. And it doesn't stop there. The example also talks about her medication, which is given around 9 a.m. It specifies that a registered nurse has to give it to her, make sure she swallows it properly, give her something to drink, and watch her carefully because of her history of stroke.
Okay, so it's not just about the tasks themselves, it's about the qualifications of the person doing them and any special considerations.
You got it. The sources also briefly mention the plans for her afternoon, evening, and night, including toilet breaks, hygiene assistance, medication, and opportunities for her to talk to the care team.
So this plan covers her whole day.
24/7. It's all laid out. And they even mention that during the night shift between 1 and 6 a.m., the focus is on offering her toilet breaks and help as needed.
So they're really thinking about her comfort and well-being around the clock.
Absolutely. So we've got the information gathering in the SIS and the detailed plan of action in the measures plan. What's next?
We need a way to keep track of everything that's happening. That's where the report sheet comes in, right?
That's right. The report sheet is all about documentation. It's where you record anything that's important or out of the ordinary.
Okay, give me the specifics. What kind of information goes on the report sheet?
Well, they mention three main things. First, you document any deviations from the measures plan. Like, let's say Frau Weber refuses to get out of bed one morning. That would be a deviation. And you have to explain why it happened.
So you're not just recording the change, you're also providing context.
Exactly. The second thing you document is any events or changes in the person's condition that might be relevant to their care. Like if they suddenly develop a fever or start behaving differently.
Like important stuff.
It is. And finally, you document any information you get from other people involved in their care. Like the doctor might have new instructions, or a therapist might have observations from their session, or family members might share concerns. All of that goes on the report sheet.
So it's like a central hub for all the important information about their care.
Exactly. And one thing the tutorial points out is that you don't need to document every little routine thing that happens.
That makes sense. If it's already in the measures plan, no need to write it down every time.
Right. That saves a lot of time and paperwork.
And it lets the caregivers focus on the things that really matter. So we've covered the SIS, the measures plan, and the report sheet. What about the final piece of the puzzle, the evaluation?
Evaluation. It's so important, but often overlooked.
Why is that?
Well, I think when you're busy caring for people, it's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day tasks and forget to step back and see the bigger picture.
It's like you're so focused on doing the work that you forget to check if it's actually working.
Right. But evaluation is crucial. It's how you make sure the care plan is still meeting the person's needs, and it's how you make adjustments as those needs change.
So how does evaluation work in the SIS?
Well, first, you have to decide how often you're going to do it. And the SIS recommends individualizing the evaluation periods.
So not everyone gets evaluated at the same time?
Exactly. It depends on how stable their health is, how intense their care needs are, what risks they're facing, and any legal requirements. Like those MD inspections we talked about earlier.
And the tutorial makes it very clear. If you haven't done an evaluation, the care plan is incomplete.
No evaluation, no complete care plan. They're very firm about that.
I can see why. So what happens during the evaluation?
It's a structured process. You look back at the SIS, you see if the goals of the care plan are being met, you see if the interventions are working, you reassess the risks, and you make any necessary changes to the plan.
So it's a constant cycle of planning, doing, checking, and adjusting.
Exactly. And it's all about making sure the care is truly tailored to the individual and that it's keeping up with their changing needs.
One thing that really stands out to me about the SIS is the constant emphasis on a person-centered approach. It's like a golden thread running through the entire process.
It really is. The whole framework is built around treating the person receiving care as an active partner in their own care. And it all starts with capturing their perspective in Field B, like we talked about earlier.
That's their platform to share their story, their hopes, their fears.
Exactly. But it doesn't stop there. The ongoing dialogue between the caregiver and the individual in Field C1 is so important too. And even that signature in Field A, that symbolizes the partnership, that agreement to work together. Do you ever wonder, though, in real life, if getting that signature ever becomes like a point of tension?
I was just thinking about that. Sometimes paperwork can feel so impersonal, and I wonder if in some cases, asking for that signature might feel more like a bureaucratic hurdle than a genuine sign of partnership.
That's a really valid point. And it highlights how crucial it is to implement the SIS in a way that feels genuine and respectful. It shouldn't just be about ticking boxes. It should be about real conversation and shared decision-making. And it's not just about the individual and the caregiver either. The SIS also takes into account the role of family and friends, especially in that section about social relationships and living environment.
Like with Frau Weber's daughter, she provided valuable information, and she brings her personal items to make her feel more at home.
Exactly. It acknowledges that care happens within a larger social context. It's not just about the individual in isolation.
Now, I know a lot of care facilities are really concerned about those MD inspections, those medical service inspections. How does the SIS help with that?
Well, the SIS actually provides a lot of security when it comes to those inspections because it's so structured and transparent. The documentation is complete, it's easy to follow, and it clearly shows the connection between the person's needs, the risks, the planned interventions, the ongoing reports, and the evaluations.
So it's like a clear audit trail.
Exactly. It shows the inspectors that the care is well planned and well documented and that you're following professional standards.
And that you're taking risk management seriously.
Right. That's a big one. The systematic way you assess and address risks in Field C2, that's really important for showing that you're committed to providing safe and high-quality care. And of course, the fact that you're regularly evaluating the care plan, that shows that you're always looking for ways to improve.
So the SIS isn't just about making life easier for caregivers, although it definitely streamlines the documentation process. It's also about proving to external authorities that you're providing excellent care.
Absolutely. It's about striking that balance between, meeting administrative requirements
Yeah.
and delivering truly person-centered care.
Okay, as we wrap up this deep dive, what are the key takeaways about the SIS that you want our listeners to remember?
Well, I think the biggest thing is that the SIS is all about improving care. It's about making things more efficient, more personalized, and more effective. And it does that by focusing on the individual, by encouraging collaboration, and by promoting a systematic and evidence-based approach to care.
It's about working smarter, not harder.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And I think for any facility or care provider that's looking to improve, the SIS is a really valuable tool.
It's a framework for change, a way to rethink how we approach care documentation and care delivery.
Exactly. And I think the most exciting thing about it is that it really puts the person receiving care at the center of everything.
It's about their story, their needs, their preferences.
Their voice.
Well, this has been a truly fascinating deep dive into the structured information collection. It's given us a lot to think about.
It has. And it makes you wonder, if this kind of structured, person-centered approach can work so well in healthcare, could we apply similar principles in other fields?
That's a great question. Could we use a similar approach in education, social work, or even in the way businesses understand their customers?
It's a thought-provoking idea, isn't it?
It really is. If you're interested in learning more about the SIS, I encourage you to check out that YouTube tutorial by Die Pflegeexpertin Schwester Eva and the accompanying text. And if you're interested in exploring the broader themes we touched on today, you might want to look into person-centered care models and the challenges of documentation in different fields.
There's a lot to explore.
There is. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll be back soon with another exciting topic.
Until next time.
See you then.